Good afternoon and welcome to this press conference of the International Observer Mission to the presidential election in Poland. Welcome to those of you who joined us after the first round and to those who are joining us for the first time today. You're most welcome. Here on the podium, we have representatives of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. We'll begin with brief presentations of our findings from the podium, and there will then be time for your questions. I first give the floor to Dunja Mijatovic, who heads the ODIHR observation mission.
Thank you, Katja. Good afternoon, colleagues, dear media representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you very much for your interest in the work of Observer Mission to Poland's 2025 presidential election. I have the privilege of heading the Observer Mission from the OSCE ODIHR, and my team of election experts and myself are in the capital, and long-term observers are also across the country since early April. This has given us the real opportunity to observe campaign period and both rounds of the election closely but also comprehensively. My thanks once again goes to Polish authorities for the invitation to observe and for the excellent cooperation over the course of the election observation so far. I'd also like to thank our partners in the International Election Observation Mission from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe for their ongoing partnership and cooperation. I'll begin by taking you through a summary of our initial findings, and we'll then go into more detail on some of the key aspects of our observation that can be found in the report we are publishing today. So the second round of the Polish presidential election was intensely contested, and while fundamental freedoms were respected in the dynamic campaign, the long-standing political polarization and societal divide deepened between the two rounds. This is an issue that we mentioned before, but it's worth emphasizing it once again. Technical preparations were conducted professionally and efficiently, despite some regulatory shortcomings and limited transparency of the decision-making of the election administration. Inadequate campaign conduct and finance regulations that enabled the involvement of public officials as well as frequent engagement of third parties in the campaign, including online, detracted from the accountability and integrity of the process. Multiple efforts were deployed to counter disinformation, foreign interference, and inauthentic online activity. However, their effectiveness was weakened by insufficient institutional coordination, limited and delayed public communications around the measures taken, and inconsistent responses by social platforms. The only televised debate offered little substantive exchange. The combination of media polarization and biased coverage, including by the public broadcaster, limited voters' access to impartial information and their ability to meaningfully assess the platforms of the runoff candidates. Concerns about the independence of the judiciary persisted, including with respect to electoral matters. On election day, in the limited number of polling stations observed by the LEOM, the various stages of the election process were assessed as well organized, professional, and calm. But as in the first round, the secrecy of the vote was often not adhered to. Both rounds of Poland's presidential elections were competitive, and voters could make a meaningful choice between different political options. However, this profound political polarization that deepened further between the two rounds was disturbing, and I do hope that incoming president will work to bring society together and that all sides across the political and social spectrum will make an effort to cooperate in Poland. Now I will take you briefly through a few key points of our findings. First, let me go into a little more detail about the campaign. The entire campaign exposed the depth of Poland's political polarization and societal divisions, underscoring the need for an inclusive dialogue that involves the whole society. And while it was good to see that use of inflammatory and derogatory language declined noticeably in the second round campaign, narratives targeting minorities continued to circulate. It is now vital that political leaders must further strengthen the trustworthiness and accountability of Poland's democratic institutions, for the benefit of all citizens. Genuine democracy should not be a zero-sum game, it is a shared responsibility. Second, the online environment. While the national authorities maintain their efforts to protect the election process from disinformation and foreign interference, these efforts were weakened by insufficient coordination as well as limited and contradictory public communication about the measures taken. The appointment of a digital service coordinator only shortly before the first round resulted in a lack of tangible impact. Ahead of the second round, the effectiveness of responses by the social networks continued to vary significantly, resulting in a high share of flagged content remaining unaddressed on some platforms. As concerns of online manipulation known as inauthentic behavior in election campaigning have increased across many OSCE participating states, so have our observation activities in this area. It is therefore important to understand our role in this area. This is to see if the authorities can detect such activity and how they respond. And this is what we've been observing. So we assess the platforms and the state's readiness to detect and address suspicious activities, the legal and institutional arrangements put in place to do this, the effectiveness of any intervention, and the state's cooperation with the relevant online platforms. While we do observe campaigning online by candidates, we are not there to detect violations, inauthentic behavior, or coordinated manipulation. Now, thirdly, let me move on to the media. Our observation found, as I already stated, that the media environment remained highly polarized, with many outlets demonstrating editorial bias that further amplified the confrontational campaign. This regrettably limited voters' access to impartial information when it was most needed. In addition, the only televised debate between the two candidates ahead of the second round was characterized by an absence of any effective moderation, allowing it to be used as a platform for mutual accusations rather than offering a meaningful comparison of political programs. For campaign finance, regulations are applicable to both rounds, but they do not ensure transparency, accountability, and integrity. The inadequate campaign finance regulations enable the frequent involvement of third parties, reducing accountability and the integrity of the process. 5, legislation and the judiciary. The lack of specific provisions in election legislation directly related to the second round of explicit articles of the time frame for the second round campaign period and the ability to challenge the results of the first round reduce legal certainty and undermine the right to an effective legal remedy. And at the same time, concerns continued about the lack of independence of the Supreme Court chamber established in 2018 that is responsible for validating election results. This controversy has lowered public trust in the judiciary, and this needs to be recovered through sustained reform. Finally, the election administration. The professionalism of the electoral institutions is encouraging, and the NEC and lower-level election commissions manage the process efficiently throughout, although the fact that sessions of the national election commissions were not open to the public reduced transparency. Election day itself was calm, and the process was professional, well organized, but again, the secrecy of the vote was often not ensured. And before I finish, I would like to express my gratitude to the long-term observers who have been working across the country as I already stated, since mid-April. Heartfelt thanks also to the team of experts here in Warsaw for all their hard work and their energy and dedication. And my particular gratitude goes to the local staff. Without them, our observation would not have been possible. So thank you, and I look forward to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we turn to Julian Bulai, who heads the PACE delegation.
Thank you so much, Madam Andrush. Dear journalists, dear representatives of the civil society, just a few words about me. I'm a Romanian MP, member of the Foreign Affairs Committee at home, and when at PACE in Strasbourg, I'm the chair of the Liberal Group. So, as you know, the Parliamentary Assembly was invited to observe this presidential election by the authorities, given that the country is currently subject to our monitoring procedure. I would like to thank the authorities for their invitation and for the smooth cooperation in carrying out this mission. I would also like to extend my warm thanks to you, Madam Mijatovic, head of the ODIHR mission, and to your highly skilled and professional team for our excellent cooperation these past few days. As per custom practice, the Parliamentary Assembly was present in the second round with a limited delegation of 8 observers, including our experts from the Venice Commission. This time, our teams observed polling stations in and around Warsaw, Łódź, Kutno, Białystok, Puławy, and Lublin. First, I would like to congratulate the Polish people on their commitment on the high voter turnout in the second round of the presidential elections, both domestically and abroad. Despite a high level of societal polarization, Polish voters demonstrated their commitment to high-quality democracy, confirming that the country has a solid democratic system. We also value the contribution of all Polish citizens involved in the 31,000 polling stations who ensured that the elections were conducted calmly and professionally. Special mention should be made to the significant participation of women on electoral boards. As well as observing Election Day, we also observed the electoral environment in which electoral campaigns are conducted. Let me highlight a few issues that we found important and which will be addressed in our upcoming report. Well, we were impressed by how committed the Polish people were to going to vote, even with their families. While I understand that this is a custom practice in Poland, vote secrecy, however, is a pillar of our shared electoral heritage. The state is obliged to provide the conditions for secret voting, and the voters have the right and the privilege to exercise this right. This is an important safeguard to ensure that everyone feels free to vote, immune from any undue social or political pressure in both urban and rural areas. Then, we also identified some vulnerabilities in the electoral process. During the electoral campaign, we witnessed disinformation and foreign interference, much of which the relevant Polish institutions linked to sources within the Russian Federation. The lack of efficient coordination among institutions limited the effectiveness of efforts to counter these attempts. This issue is of concern not only for Poland, but for all Council of Europe member states, and our Assembly adopted last April a resolution on foreign interference as a threat to democratic security in Europe. Hybrid and cyber threats are another vulnerability which undermines electoral integrity and people's trust in the system. On 29th of May, the Prime Minister announced the extension of national security measures in response to ongoing hybrid and cyber threats from the Russian Federation and Belarus. Over the past 2 weeks, there has been a great deal of concern about the independence of the Supreme Court chamber in charge of validating the election results. According to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, this chamber does not meet the criteria for a tribunal established by law. Concerns about the independence of the judiciary, including in electoral matters, will persist beyond this specific election. The absence of regulations of third-party campaigning is also an issue. These entities campaign for candidates but are not legally required to disclose their income and expenditure sources, which undermines the transparency, accountability, and integrity of campaign financing. We will now monitor post-election developments and prepare recommendations for our delegation to submit to the Parliamentary Assembly in September. As part of our monitoring procedure, we also expect to engage in a dialogue with the authorities to address key rule of law issues that impact electoral matters. I call, on behalf of PACE, the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, on Polish politicians to act responsibly and collegially and help the country resolve these issues. And now I'm looking forward to questions from your side, if there are any. Thank you.
Many thanks. Indeed, now there's time for your questions. As this is a press conference, we will only be taking questions from journalists, so I'd be grateful if you could begin by introducing yourself and your media outlet. Are there any questions from the media? This is your only chance. It's already after the second round. No questions? You already understand everything? In that case, we'll leave it there. The report and the press release are available in both language versions as you go out, and they will shortly be available on ODIHR's website. Thank you again for your interest.